With the 2024 election only being 117 days away, a lot of polls have come out and we have made many videos examining these polls, but it is also important to make videos to examine how accurate these polls were as compared to the 2020 results. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the 2020 polls and how accurate they were, and then putting them on the 2024 map with the polls that we have this time around. But before we get started on this video, let's check out some of the national polling and compare it to what it actually was. Biden was supposed to win by 8.4%. He only ended up winning the popular vote by around 4.5%. Now, in this cycle, in 2024, Trump is favored to win by 2.1. So using that logic, Trump's going to win the popular vote by around 6 percentage points. But we're going to get into these state results now, and we're going to be filling out this map compared to the 2020 polls and fix how accurate they were with the 2024 polls. And I've already filled out all of these safer states, and as you can see, some of these blue states that were safe have gone down to likely, and that is because the polls actually suggest that they will be under 12 percentage points. So we're going to be taking the rest of these states that are blank, which are expected to be the closest states out of all of them, and we're going to be filling out this map going west to east. And we're going to begin with the state of Nevada, and Nevada was a state that Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton won by 2.4%. The poll suggested 5.3%. So combining this with the current 4.8% Trump is up in this time around, it is going to be a likely state on this map, up from a lean state in the Democrat column. So it's a pretty huge shift towards the right. And going to Arizona, it's going to be a very similar story with the expected vote being Biden plus 2.6. He ended up winning by only 0.31, and the polls this time around have been also very favorable for Trump, and this will move the state all the way in the likely column as well. Moving now to Colorado and New Mexico, two states that Joe Biden did fairly well in. We're going to begin with the state of Colorado. Usually I would consider this a safe state for Joe Biden, but the polls have been fairly close. This state is one of the only states that usually underestimates Democrats by a bit. As we can see here, Joe Biden was underestimated by 1 percentage point. And applying this to the poll that we have today, and we don't really have an aggregate, this will actually put the state all in all in the likely column for Joe Biden. And in the state of New Mexico, we're going to see here that the polls, although there were not too many, they did release an aggregate which had Biden up by 11. It ended up overestimating him by only 1 percentage point. So taking the polls in 2024 that we have and averaging them out, this will end up being a race that is going to be fairly close, right under that 6-point mark, because we do have some polls recently that have had Biden up by only tilt margins. So all in all, this will be going into that lean column. Now, to fill out the rest of the western half states, we need to go to the state of Texas, which was originally in the 2020 cycle expected to be a very, very close race, where Trump was only favored to win the state by 1.1%. He ended up winning it by 5.6. So that's a fairly large underestimation of over 5 percentage points. Applying that to our 8.5 percentage point margin in the polls, and Trump will win by a safe margin. And this margin hasn't even been seen since around maybe 2012 would be the closest result, where Romney won by 16, maybe even close to McCain's 12-point win. So this totally, diminishes all of the Democrat support that has been taking part in the past 12 years. But now moving on to probably the most important region, the Midwest, and we're going to begin with the state of Iowa. Iowa this time around has been considered out of range for Democrats, and they haven't really been targeting it as much. In 2020, it was expected to be competitive. Trump only by 1.3, but Trump ended up winning the state by 8.2. So applying the polls that we do have this time around, Trump will end up winning the state by way over 12 percentage points, and this will go in that safe column. In Minnesota, last time around, it was not supposed to be as close, and it was, fairly accurate. It was not too close. Biden ended up only underestimating the polls by around 2 percentage points. But this time around, the polls are a lot closer, only 1.1 lead for Joe Biden, which means that this state actually goes in the tilt column for Donald Trump. He actually is able to flip this state And this is a state that hasn't voted Republican since Richard Nixon. So it is fairly historic if he is able to do so. Next, moving over to the state of Wisconsin, one state that probably has the worst track record for polling averages, where Biden was supposed to win by a whopping 8.4%. He ended up winning by 0.6%. So that is an underestimation of Trump by 8 percentage points. Applying that to polls we have now, and Trump is expected to win the state not by a lean margin, but by a likely margin of around 9 percentage points. In the state of Michigan, also a state that Joe Biden was overestimated, not to the same extent, but by still a pretty large margin. 7.9% was supposed to be that win. He ended up winning by around 2.8%. Overestimation by around 5 percentage points. Applying it to now, this is a fairly tight race where Trump leads by 0.5%. But if we put in that polling margin, he will end up leading by almost a likely margin, but quite on that border, around 5 percentage points. Still, this is a pretty solid win for Donald Trump. But before we continue on with this video, please like and subscribe, comment, and share this video with your friends. Thank you guys so much for watching. And now we're going to get into the state of Ohio. And Ohio is another state where polling just suffers a lot. And for whatever reason, polling is really bad in the Midwest region. Maybe this time around that will change because they're showing more realistic numbers. For example, they're showing Trump leads in Iowa and Ohio by margins that we should expect. And they're showing pretty close races in these 4 states. Now, how much does Trump overestimate them? We're not really sure, but let's just say that he would overestimate them by a similar margin in 2020. This is what this map would look like. In Ohio, it is pretty bad for Joe Biden, where he was supposed to lose by 0.8. He ended up losing by 8. So that's around a 7 percentage points that he was supposed to win by more. And if we apply this to 2024, 9.3 percentage points, that becomes a extremely safe state for Donald Trump. And that will bring him up to 241. Moving on to the state of Pennsylvania, probably one of the most important states in this election, that tipping point state. It does have 19 electoral votes, down 1 from 2020. Biden won it by 1.2%. He was expected to win it by around 4.7. So definitely one of the more accurate Rust Belt state pollings. And this would mean that Biden was overestimated by only around 3 percentage points. Putting that into this margin, we're going to get another Trump likely state where he leads by just over 6 percentage points. To cap off the northern half of the United States, let's go to the states of New Hampshire and Maine, beginning with the state of New Hampshire, where Joe Biden was supposed to win the state by 11.1%. He ended up winning still by a pretty strong margin of 7.4%, which is only an overestimation of around 4 percentage points. Applying that to polls we have now, Biden has been, decreasing his margin as, polls have been gone by. We remember some polls back then had him up by around 10-ish. Now the latest one has Trump up by 2, 4 over here, 3, 6. So the margins have definitely come down a lot. In the previous video, I had said how Biden is doing pretty good in this state. But now, as we see in other swing states that Biden won, he is struggling quite a little bit. This one I think he still has favored in by a very narrow amount, since he was overestimated by around 4 percentage points, and the polls now have him up by around that margin. We'll have to flip this state also to Republicans, where Donald Trump will win the state by less than 2 percentage points. And in the state of Maine, another state that Joe Biden improved of a lot from Hillary Clinton, he was supposed to win by 13%. And he ended up winning by 9. Still a pretty considerable margin up from Hillary Clinton's 2.9 percentage point win. But still, that's an overestimation of around 4 percentage points. Applying that to the polls now, we actually have a Trump lead usually if we take all the polls into consideration. And this means that Trump will be up in this state by a lean margin. Trump only needs one more state to reach 270 electoral votes. And we are going next to the South to complete this map, beginning with the state of Virginia. Virginia was not even close in 2020. Biden won the state by 10 percentage points, and he was supposed to win it by around 12. So that's not much of an overestimation at all. Pretty accurate polls. This time around, Biden is only up on average in the state by around 1 or 2. So if we take that into consideration and apply the margin of error to these polls over here, we're going to see that Biden will end up holding the state by almost almost an even margin. And honestly, some polls even have Trump up in Virginia by around 0.2%, 0.1%. DDH2 actually has Trump up right now in their margin, but I'm going off of 538, and right now this would be a barely hold for Joe Biden. Next, moving on to the state of North Carolina, a state that Republicans have been able to win consistently. But in 2020, Joe Biden was supposed to win by 1.8%. He ended up losing by 1.3%. So that's around a 3-point overestimation for Joe Biden. And in 2024, Trump is up by a considerable 6.1%. Applying those margins there, Trump is up by a likely margin. And this is where he was able to take the election with 282 electoral votes. And we still have 2 more states left. So let's go down to the state of Georgia, where Joe Biden was projected to win by 1.2%. He only ended up winning by 0.2%, but the polls were very accurate in the state of Georgia, which is pretty evident because now it shows Trump by winning by 5.2%, moving it up to 6.2. That'll be barely in that likely column. And we'll notice a trend here that the states more in the South are more accurate. The polls are definitely more accurate. Meanwhile, the states, especially in the Midwest, are very inaccurate. It may change this time around, but we're going off of what happened in the past. 2016 was very similar, where the polls were also more accurate in the South. But moving now to our final state, the state of Florida, Joe Biden was supposed to win by 2.5%. But Donald Trump ended up winning by 3.4%. So applying that to the 2024 election, it actually shows Trump winning the state by a solid margin. And this will be our final map. Trump at 324, Biden at 210. Trump is able to flip a lot of these states in the South and quite a few in the North, especially in the Midwest, the most crucial states being Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Biden is able to hold on to Virginia by a very narrow margin, as well as the states of New Mexico down here. But this will be the map, and this will be the results for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Put all your comments in the comment section below, and I'll check you guys out in the next one.